Today on Israel Hayom Insider, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces plans to back a number of reforms to Israel's electoral system, including allowing Israelis abroad to vote by absentee ballot. Is this the change we've been looking for? With me in the studio to discuss this, columnist Ruthie Blum.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Ruthie. I'm Steve Ganot. So, Ruthie, the current system is that we have absentee ballots for diplomats, and for sailors, basically, on ships. Right? Those are the only people who can vote abroad. Everyone else, if you're not in Israel, you can't vote. According to this proposed reform, there will be absentee ballots. We don't know exactly how it's going to work if it passes, but probably, I guess, mail-in ballots. And Israelis who live abroad, I don't know if it's, how many years living abroad will count, but Israelis living or traveling abroad will be able to vote. Is this a good idea?
Well, look, as an American with dual citizenship, an Israeli-American, I know about absentee ballots. We are allowed to vote in the American elections.
Right.
So it sort of seems natural to me that it could be the other way around as well.
Right, although we're also taxed by the United States.
That's
and,
right.
Israelis abroad, I don't think are taxed.
Well, the American Revolution was based on the motto, no taxation without representation.
Right.
So one of the reasons that I still vote
without taxation.
Exactly. So the question is, would those same Israelis abroad, if told, okay, you can vote in these elections, but now you're going to have to deal with the income tax authorities in Israel, maybe they would say, forget about it, okay? Because I feel that way about America, However, what has been said about the issue of the absentee ballots is that the common wisdom supposedly says that the people abroad, the Israelis living abroad, would vote for Netanyahu or his party or to the right of him.
So I wanted to ask you about this because obviously the government is not going to support something that they don't think is to their advantage.
Right.
We don't want to be naive about that.
Right,
So,
exactly.
So it must be that Netanyahu and the right think that they have an advantage with Israelis abroad. First of all, is it true? I mean, do we know this?
First of all, I have been asking everybody I know, and nobody seems to know the actual statistic, does it? Political statistic.
No one really knows.
Now, you could say that that this is in the Prime Minister's interest. That means, what I assume that means, is that he has done research and has figured that is the case.
It could be also, it could be that more right-wing Israelis abroad are going to be more motivated to vote. If you've been living abroad for many years and you're on the left or on the far left, you might say, you know what, forget about it. I'm done with Israel. But maybe on the right, they'll be more motivated to vote.
Because they're more nationalistic. And on the other hand, you might say it's interesting that someone so nationalistic would leave Israel and go live elsewhere. That's another question. But in general, you see, my feeling would be, I don't know what the statistics are. I don't know what the breakdown is. I know left-wing Israelis abroad, right-wing Israelis abroad, and some who don't actually care very much. But what I would say is that it's similar to a prime minister saying, go out and vote. How do we know? The more people that go out and vote, it's not always in the interest of the person who's saying go out and vote.
Right.
The same thing here. I would wager that if you did a cross-section of the Israelis living abroad, it would be similar to the Israelis living in Israel.
Okay, one statistic I read was that about 500,000 people abroad, Israelis abroad, would be eligible to vote. I'm not sure exactly how they're measuring this. I don't know how accurate it is. I also don't know, if you've been abroad, let's say for 50 years, right? It's possible. Are you still an Israeli? Do you still get to vote?
Right, if you have an Israeli passport because your father was in the Palmach, do you vote? I don't know. There are people who have Israeli passports who never have lived here.
Right. And there's another question. I mean,
I don't know.
Let's not forget, it's not just Jews, it's also Arabs. How many Israeli Arabs are living abroad?
Exactly.
And how does that affect everything?
Exactly. That's why I actually believe that the cross-section would be similar to the cross-section at home, abroad and at home. That's what I believe.
But it does occur to me that this could be maybe the government's way of dealing with the demographic problem. Maybe they think this is the answer. They want to keep a Jewish majority. There are a lot of Jews abroad. Maybe they'll make it easy for those Jews to get citizenship, or a lot of Israelis abroad, and maybe the ones who are motivated to vote, in this case, would be the Jewish ones, and this would be a way to bolster the Jewish representation in the Knesset. I don't know if that's what they have in mind, but it's possible.
It's definitely possible, and it may even be advisable if what you're worried about is demography in terms of politics. I mean, after all, one of the things that the left here continually says is that we have a demographic problem, and this means this is actually coming from the left, and therefore we can't remain a democracy and a Jewish state unless we separate. Because, and why do they say that? Because all the Arabs will have the vote, and eventually the Knesset will be all Arab.
But it would look like a trick if we were like, okay, we can't really keep a Jewish majority with the people who are living here. Let's count all the people abroad also. Let's make it real easy for Jews abroad to get citizenship, and then they can vote. I don't know. It looks a little. It doesn't look
possible,
great.
But on the other hand, why shouldn't Israel have laws like other democracies if there are absentee ballots? I know in some countries and some don't, and so, you know.
Canada has an interesting situation. They have absentee ballots, but only up to 5 years. If you've been abroad for more than 5 years, if you've been outside of Canada,
then you forfeit.
Then you forfeit it.
Now, interestingly, one of the reasons that there never were absentee ballots for Israelis is that in the early days of the state, and I would wager in the first, let's say, 2 decades for sure, it was considered shameful for Israelis to leave Israel and move abroad. And so the attitude towards them was that they were sort of traitors and abandoning the country, and therefore there's no way they would be given privileges.
Right.
But in the last decade, and even more,
it's softened.
It's not only softened, it's on the contrary. It's full of status to move abroad.
I'm not sure
Israelis
about that, but okay.
are not considered traitors for going and working in high tech in Silicon Valley. On the contrary,
there's a lot more going back and forth.
Much more, and the idea is that the diaspora, we need the diaspora needs us, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Another part of this proposal is to take away one of the president's really only powers. I mean, he has 2 powers, and this would be taking 2 formal powers. One is to pardon prisoners, and the other is this. After an election, the president consults with all the parties. This is the situation right now. Consults with the parties, and then tasks one of the members of Knesset, can be any member of Knesset, to try to form the new coalition. Now, according to this reform, the head of the largest party would automatically be tasked with that job, and the president wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Right, but in the end, that would be an illusion as well. Because today, the reason the president chooses a certain party, even if there have been a couple of cases, or one in particular, where the party that won did not end up forming the government, didn't have to do with the president deciding that. It had to do with the fact, because the reason the president tasked the other party was because it was able to form a coalition in terms of a bloc.
Right. Well,
so this is all illusions. What the reform has to be, not having all of those parties who start wheeling and dealing in order to make a coalition. That would be genuine reform. The reform would be, we got 2 or 3 parties, and you vote for one of them, and the winner wins.
Well, they didn't say 2 or 3 parties.
No, they didn't.
Let's give the details about what happened. In 2009, the largest party was Kadima. By 1 seat, by the way. 1 seat over the Likud, but the largest bloc was the right wing headed by the Likud.
Right.
So after the president consulted with all the parties, it was clear to him that he should choose Netanyahu to try to form the coalition.
That's right, because even if he had chosen...
Well, if this reform had gone through, had already been the law, then Livni would have automatically been tasked with forming the government.
Correct.
Maybe people would have come to her and said, okay, we're
well,
going to play ball with
I
you.
doubt it. I actually doubt that, but because what I'm saying is that's the issue that I was saying is kind of an illusion. She would have been tasked with it, and then she wouldn't have been able to, because ideologically this also has to do with the parties and what they're willing to forfeit in their ideology in order to join a certain coalition. So, you think she might have been able to, and I'm saying that the reason the president didn't give her the task was so she wouldn't have been able to. So it's sort of semantics,
Maybe. I do see that these reforms, they're interesting, but they're kind of marginal. The deeper reforms are we ever going to have regional representation in this country? Right now, the whole country is one large electoral district. We don't have separate districts. We don't have our own representation by region. That's a change that many people have proposed. I think it should be maybe mixed. You should have some people elected nationally and some people elected regionally. But anyway, that's not being proposed right now.
But that's a little, one of the reasons is that this country is so tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, you imagine taking a state in the United States and saying, okay, now you're going to have regional elections, this representation. I mean, we do have municipalities, we do have regional councils.
Yes, we do.
But it's true, they're not Knesset members.
Right.
Okay, that's true.
Right.
But it's such a tiny country, is the
right,
point.
That's right.
And
the issues, many of the big issues are national. The security issues, peace, land, things like that are national issues. There are regional issues also, but anyway, that's something I'd like to see, but it's not part of this.
I would mainly like to see far fewer parties.
Yeah.
Because that, I think, is the reason that nobody can govern properly in this country.
We've raised the electoral threshold a number of times, and which has gotten rid of the smaller parties. The Arab parties came together because of this reason. They
yes.
did, right? And
right.
Maybe we'll see that continuing. I don't know. Maybe we'll see the continuing to raise
I
the
hope
threshold.
so, because, the idea that you can have a party made up of one member because he passed the threshold and got into the Knesset is ridiculous, in my opinion. It's just, what does that mean? Every
right.
little interest group has his own party, I think is
right.
ridiculous.
Well, we'll have to come back and talk more about what would be the ideal system. I don't think we've reached it yet.
There is no ideal system.
There is no ideal system. What would be a better system? But it's interesting that that electoral reform is, there is a focus on it right now, and maybe this is the beginning of more changes to come. We'll have to wait and see. I hope so. I hope that there'll be a deeper analysis about how the Knesset can be more effective and what changes really are needed. But these might be some good changes. Ruthie,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Interesting
Steve, as
discussion.
always.
And thanks to the viewers, of course. Continue to send us your feedback. We love to get it. Let us know how we're doing and what you'd like to hear us talk about. And we will see you next time.